Why would the universe let you meet someone you were never meant to keep? Why would it let you feel so deeply seen, only to lose that gaze before you could understand it? There's a certain silence that follows soul recognition, not rejection, not abandonment, just timing. Maybe you've felt it too. That haunting tenderness of being known, not just your name or your story, but the rhythm of your breath, the ache beneath your smile, and then gone. If you've ever loved like that and lost like that, this isn't just heartbreak. It's a spiritual rupture, and this video, it won't fix that, but maybe it will sit beside it like a quiet hand on your back to remind you that what broke wasn't your fault, that some connections aren't homes, they're awakenings. There's something I want to show you, but we have to walk through this together, through the ache, the remembering, the fire. And maybe, just maybe, by the end, you'll realize this was never about losing them. It was always about meeting you. Thank you for being here. Let's begin. There's a silence that lives before every meeting that changes you, not the kind of silence that feels empty, but one that hums with something you can't yet name. It's like walking through your life with a quiet ache, a longing stitched into your breath, as if some part of you knows something is coming, not someone, not yet, but a moment, a shift, a pull you can't explain. You might call it loneliness, or boredom, or the sense that nothing quite fits anymore, but it's not disconnection, it's preparation, the soul's way of clearing space, the heart's way of whispering. There's something more. Before we meet them, whoever they are, we meet the ache, the echo of something ancient, calling us to remember what we've forgotten. And most of us, we try to fill that ache with noise, with doing, with people who almost feel right. But the ache isn't asking to be filled, it's asking to be felt, because the ache is the opening. It's the first crack in the shell you built around your softness, the first tremble in the armor you thought you needed. It's the soul knocking, not with answers, but with invitation, and you start to notice things. The way music suddenly feels deeper, the way a stranger's laugh hits something tender in your chest, the way silence doesn't feel so safe anymore. That's the beginning, when life starts humming under the surface, when you feel like something is watching, not in fear, but in wait. And if you're quiet enough, you'll sense it, a presence that hasn't arrived yet, a story that hasn't begun, but is already unfolding inside you. You don't know their name, you don't know the form they'll take, but you know something's coming because you're changing. And maybe that's the point. They don't arrive to change your life. They arrive because you're already changing. They are the mirror, not the cause. This ache, this subtle unraveling of everything that once felt certain, is sacred. It's the soul preparing its altar. The moment before the spark, the breath before the kiss, the stillness before the storm. You are not broken, you are becoming. And though you haven't met them yet, their echo is already reshaping you, like moonlight before dawn. They touch you first, in the silence. It didn't feel like meeting someone new. It felt like remembering, like a dream you couldn't quite recall, suddenly flooding back in one breath. You saw them, and everything in you went still. Not your mind, your body. Your chest tightened, your skin flushed, your breath caught as if trying to hold something ancient. That's how the soul recognizes itself, not with logic, not with history, but with vibration, with presence. There was no need to explain, no need to impress. Something inside you just knew. This matters. Not because they said the right things, not because of chemistry in the ordinary sense, but because their existence made you feel real, as if all the pieces you'd tucked away, the softness you muted, the ache you silenced, the hope you buried, rose to the surface, just by standing near them. It felt cosmic, like fate, but not loud, more like a knowing that settled in your bones, and you didn't fall for them in steps. You fell instantly, like a gasp, like falling asleep mid-sentence and waking in a different world. There's a name for this, not in textbooks, but in the language of the soul. A soul recognition, a meeting written somewhere before time. Carl Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. You weren't just touched, you were changed. And for a moment, you forgot how to protect yourself. You didn't smile strategically. You didn't shrink or perform. You just were. And they didn't flinch. They didn't look away. They met your gaze like it was sacred ground. That's when something deeper stirred. Not love, not yet, but memory of who you were before the walls, before the edits. Maybe they didn't even stay long, but in their presence, you met a version of yourself you hadn't seen in years. And that's why it still echoes, not because of what was said, but because of what was felt in silence. It's okay if it still aches. You're not grieving a person. You're grieving the part of you that only spoke when they were near. The part that dared to hope again. The part that softened without asking if it was safe. The part that whispered, "Maybe I can be loved like this." If that's what you're missing, say it. Even just in a whisper, to yourself, to the night. I remember. Let that be enough for now. You don't need to explain it. You only need to feel it. Because what you felt was real. There's a moment you feel it before you name it. A shift in the air, a soft closing, not of a door, but of something more subtle. Presence. They're still there, and yet something is already leaving. Maybe it starts with silence, the kind that isn't peaceful, but pregnant. Heavy with unsaid truths, with timing unraveling beneath every breath. And you try to hold on, not out loud, but in the little ways, longer replies, softened tone, the reaching smile, as if your tenderness could anchor them. But you know, somewhere deep in your chest, where the first spark began, you feel it flicker. This is the part no one prepares you for. The departure before the goodbye, the presence fading while they're still smiling. You don't fight it, not really, because it doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like destiny closing its eyes, like a story folding in on itself before it could be written. And you ask, why? Why would something so true end before it began? The answer doesn't come in words, it comes in ache, in the breath you forget to take, in the stillness after they leave the room and you stay frozen in what might have been. You don't cry right away. It's too sacred for that, too deep. This isn't drama, this is fracture. Not just in the heart, but in the story your soul was starting to believe. You replay moments, not to analyze, but to feel them again. The way they said your name, the pause before they responded, the softness that made you believe you could finally be met, but now all that remains is absence. Not loud, just persistent, like a room where the light once lived. And now everything looks like memory. You grieve, but not in a single burst. It's slower than that, like rain that doesn't stop. You still see their face in the curve of other smiles, still hear their voice in songs they never sang, still feel their echo in places they never touched, because they didn't just enter your life, they entered your nervous system. And when they left, they didn't take their energy. They left it behind, woven into your breath, your bones, your becoming. This isn't heartbreak, this is haunting, a sacred one. You try to name it, but there's no name. Just a silence, where something holy used to be. You wanted to believe it was forever, even if part of you knew it wasn't, because something that strong, that luminous, surely couldn't be fleeting, right? But some fires aren't meant to be kept. They arrive not to warm you long-term, but to burn something away. You tried to hold it, not with force, with hope, with all the softness you had left. But no matter how gently you reached, you couldn't catch the flame without letting it consume you. And maybe that's the lesson, that not all love is meant to be safe. Some love is meant to undo you, just enough to reveal what you've hidden. You wanted a home, they were a match, and when you struck it, it lit everything. The light was real, the warmth was real, but so was the ash. It's tempting to ask what went wrong, to dig through the debris for clues. But what if nothing was broken? What if this fire did exactly what it came to do? To show you what parts of you still tremble when touched, what parts long to be seen, even if only briefly. This isn't about blame, or timing, or unfinished karma. This is about truth, and truth isn't always gentle. It sometimes shows up dressed as connection, then disappears. So you can see what remains without it. You wanted forever, but they were never meant to stay. They were meant to ignite. And now you're left not with them, but with light, a strange, painful kind of glow that lives in your chest and reminds you that even brief fire leaves permanent warmth. You grieve, but it's not just for the person, it's for the idea, the version of you that thought this was the ending of your search. Now, you see it differently. They weren't your destination, they were your departure. And while your ego mourns, your soul whispers, "Now we begin." It didn't feel like love, not at first. It felt like disruption, like someone had reached into your chest and rearranged things you thought were fixed. You were steady, you had your stories, you had your rhythm, and then they arrived, not like a whisper, but like a fault line splitting open beneath your feet. You didn't see it as a gift, not yet, because awakening rarely announces itself with comfort. It begins with disturbance. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, and it never starts with peace. It starts with pressure, with rupture, with something or someone that makes staying the same impossible. They didn't just interrupt your routine, they cracked your lens, the way you saw yourself, the way you measured worth, the way you believed love should feel. And once the lens is cracked, you can't unsee what you saw through it. They didn't mean to dismantle you, but something in their presence spoke to the parts of you you'd been avoiding. Not to shame you, but to summon you, to the version of yourself that was buried beneath function, beneath control, beneath the life that looked okay but felt hollow. This wasn't punishment. This was prophecy. Your breakdown was a doorway. Your ache was an invitation. Your confusion was sacred, because the soul doesn't seek clarity. It seeks expansion. And expansion always begins with undoing. So you unraveled. And for a while you hated it. You wanted answers. They gave you questions. You wanted stability. They gave you sensation. You wanted the path. They gave you the threshold. And now, even though they're gone, you still feel the shifting. You try to go back to the before, but the door has closed, not in cruelty, in evolution. And that's what makes it sacred, not that they stayed, but that their presence unlocked a part of you no one else could reach. They were not your ending. They were your edge, the moment the soul stopped whispering and started roaring, and maybe you're still trembling. That's okay. That's what sacred disruption feels like. It's not the breaking, it's what the breaking makes room for. Grief doesn't arrive like thunder. Not always. Sometimes it seeps in like fog, gentle, relentless, everywhere. You think you've cried enough, you think you've processed. But then a song plays, or the wind shifts a certain way, and suddenly you're back in it. Not just the memory, the feeling, the ache beneath the ache. It's not just sadness, it's transformation. Grief is not the opposite of healing. It is healing. It's the heat that melts the shell around the parts you were too afraid to touch. You breathe and it stings. You rest and it hurts. You laugh. And then the guilt rises, because how could you move on when something so sacred didn't last? But here's the truth no one tells you. Some grief is sacred because it never fully leaves. It becomes a layer, not a weight, a well, a place inside you, where softness lives, where memory lives, where proof lives that you felt something real. This isn't about letting go. This is about letting in, letting the ache be a language, letting your tears become a salve, letting the absence become a teacher. You may think you're weak for still feeling it, but what if this is strength, to stay open when closing would be so much easier, to hold the ache without rushing to numb it? That's the alchemy, not turning pain into positivity, but letting pain reshape you without hardening you. Grief carves out space for depth, for compassion, for presence. It teaches you to sit with what is unspeakable, without needing to explain it, and in that sitting something shifts. The sharpness dulls, not because it stops hurting, but because you stop fighting it. You allow it to live beside you, to walk with you, to inform you, and one day you hear your own voice again, steady, unrushed, changed, not healed, transmuted. Because grief, when held with reverence, becomes grace, and grace is what allows you to live again, not despite the loss, but with it. There's a moment, quiet at first, when you realize you're still here, still breathing, still moving, still becoming, without them. Not because you stopped loving, but because love was never meant to end with their absence. The ache doesn't vanish, it shifts, becomes a thread, not tying you to them, but pulling you inward, to the version of you they awakened, the one who smiled without armor, who hoped without bracing, who whispered, "Maybe I'm worthy," for the first time in years. That version of you didn't die when they left. She's waiting, not for them, for you. This is where the real work begins, not to forget, not to move on, but to integrate, to live with what was awakened, to carry the light they helped you touch into your own hands. You start saying no to things that numb you. You start craving quiet, not out of retreat, but reverence. You stop chasing being chosen and start choosing yourself. In tiny, holy ways, you no longer beg for closure. You build it, word by word, boundary by boundary, breath by breath. You don't pretend you're fine, but you stop apologizing for not being okay. You begin speaking with your full voice, even if it shakes. You begin walking with your whole weight, even if the ground feels unfamiliar. You become the echo you once heard before meeting them. You become the mirror you once sought in their eyes. You become the fire, not to burn, but to warm. You look back, not to linger, but to honor. And still grief visits, at dusk, in dreams, in the scent of something that feels like home. But now you welcome it. Not as regression, but as remembering. You are not who you were before they came. You are not who you were when they left. You are someone new, marked by fire, held by absence, alive with truth. You no longer ask, "Will they come back?" You ask, "What did they show me about what I'm here to become?" Because the becoming, that's yours, that's always been yours. And now you're finally ready to walk it. They were not the end of your story. They were the spark, the tremor, the sacred interruption. And now here you are, not untouched, but unfolded, not whole in the old way, but widened in the way only grief and grace can do. You may still hear their name echo in strange corners of your day. You may still feel the tug, that subtle ache of what if, but you no longer live in the absence. You live in the becoming, because something in you refused to stay collapsed. Something in you rose, not like a phoenix, bright and defiant, but like a slow dawn, quiet, inevitable, carrying the weight of every shadow it had to pass through. You started lighting candles where there was once only ash. You began rebuilding not the same life, but a truer one where you belong to yourself. Where softness is no longer weakness, where longing isn't shameful but sacred. You don't forget them, you fold them in, like a line in a poem you'll never recite aloud, but still know by heart. They weren't your ending, they were your reflection. And now, you become the light that once only lived in their gaze. You write yourself back in, not as the one who lost, but as the one who learned, who lived. Who opened and who, despite it all, still loves, not blindly, not desperately, but with a steady flame that asks for nothing but truth. So if it still aches, let it. That ache is your compass. It points not to them, but to the place in you that's still alive, still wanting, still worthy. They were a moment. You are the movement. They were the question. You are the answer in progress. And no. This wasn't about being completed. This was about being called back to yourself. You are not unfinished. You are unfolding. You are not abandoned. You are becoming. Let this be your altar, not to what you lost, but to what you now hold. Let the memory bless you and not bind you. Let the grief shape you, not define you. Let the story breathe and keep breathing with it. You are the continuation. And the life ahead is not waiting for them. It's waiting for you. This isn't closure. This is consecration. You don't need to forget them. You only need to remember what they helped you find. You, not the version edited by pain, but the one they momentarily uncovered, the one you now choose to live into fully. So leave a whisper in the silence. I am still here. Not just breathing, but becoming. Let this ache become your art. Let this softness become your strength. Let this longing become your light, because they were a doorway, and you are the one who walked through.